Greetings, people of Earth. Welcome back. My name is Jax, and today we are on chapter 3 of the Tao Te Ching. As you already know, this title is called Removing Desire. And so this chapter, obviously, it's one of the early ones. It discusses the need for checking your ambition and sort of that cycle of I need more, I need to be more, I need to beat my competitors. That whole cycle, it talks about kind of breaking that cycle and not trying to compete in this ever greedy cycle of I need more, I need to be more. It talks about just removing that and how that sort of frees you from all of the things that entails. It's kind of like if you own nothing, you'll never covet anything. But it's not really advocating for owning nothing. It's just advocating for the idea of having that desire. Oh, I need to get this new thing. I need to, get these new clothes to look good. It's advocating that kind of need is actually quite toxic, and it just continually perpetuates itself, we live in a society that is full of desire and full of people who wish they looked a certain way, wish they acted a certain way, wish they had this, or wish they went on this really exotic trip. And so that kind of cycle is really toxic to yourself and to your energy, essentially. I know that sounds a little bit airy-fairy, but essentially what you're trying to do is you're trying to remove that stuff. And just like we talked about non-action and Wu Wei and the idea of not doing anything, that sort of ties into this. When it comes to the desire of things, you can just let that desire go and just say like, oh, I don't actually need that. I have all my needs met. I'm happy. I have people in my life who I love. I have enough to eat. Those are the kind of things that should be at the top of your mind. But in our society, those needs are generally met at the surface level. And so you stop sort of caring about the deeper connection, the deeper meaning. And so this is all about how to go back, how to take away. One of the things they say about Taoism is when you really start to practice this philosophy, you actually remove a lot from your life. You're not really adding stuff. If you become a Christian, you might add going to church on Sundays. You might add paying a tithe. You might add many different festivals and cultural traditions and even food to your daily life that you wouldn't have if you hadn't adopted Christianity as your faith. But Taoism is quite different in that when you adopt it, you tend to remove things from your life. It's not about adding more. It's not about more desires, more pleasures. It's not about that. It's about removing complexity, and it's about removing the superficial things in your life that you don't actually need and that are actually hurting you and not helping you in the slightest. So this is why this title is called Removing Desire, because it's one of those things that you're going to try and remove as you go through Taoism and as you learn more and read more. And if the philosophy works for you, then great. That's what it's supposed to do. And if it's not your cup of tea, then you are absolutely welcome to find a new route. But for the few of us who are terribly interested in Taoism and all it has to teach, removing desire is kind of a big part of it. I'm going to read the first line and we're going to talk about it a little bit. If talent is not glorified, people will not compete with one another. And so I think that's quite an interesting line, and it makes me think of how competitive children's sports have become. I played soccer growing up, football, whatever you want to call it. And growing up, I was in just a kind of a little league. Like it wasn't a competitive league. It was just, I think my team won championships one year and it was a big thing and we all got medals but it wasn't this kind of like super competitive thing. I remember there was one dad whose kid was the goalie and the goalkeeper, and this dad was so incredibly involved, and he would yell and shout at the kids, and it got to the point where he was actually banned from coming because he was so incredibly competitive. He wanted his kid to always be out. I mean, he was the goalkeeper, so he almost always was out, but this dad was just never happy with what was going on or what the coach was deciding, or who was out and in midfield and all this stuff. And it made us kids, I don't know, kind of on edge. It always made me on edge when he was just out there shouting like crazy and sort of dictating what should be going on, and the coach didn't know what to do. But he was so competitive, and he'd obviously like glorified the game of football, of soccer, and he'd turned it into this like very important thing when it's just a bunch of like 10-year-olds playing on a field outside of school. But he was so incredibly up there. And as a result, his son was a very good goalkeeper, but he was also like not fun to hang out with because he was so incredibly serious. And if you didn't have enough talent for him, you just weren't good enough, and he wasn't even going to associate with you. And so like this whole idea, like the glorification of talent, if talent is not glorified, people will not compete with one another. Yeah, and so like he was so competitive because his dad had glorified this thing so incredibly much. And I've heard stories in the United States that football and basketball and soccer and all these things are incredibly competitive, and parents will send their kids to elite training camps over the summer to make their skills better because they need to get to pro college ball, and then they need to get to professional basketball, professional football, professional whatever. And when I hear about some of the things that these parents are doing to their children and pushing them so incredibly hard, it's a real shame, because while it is great to work hard and try and achieve a very good skill, the idea that you are glorifying this talent and you are pushing your children so incredibly hard into something that they might not like, or maybe they just want to do it as a fun thing. I just think that there is like something inherently wrong with a system that sort of promotes that as its be all end all goal. And so I don't know, it freaks me out, and it makes me think about this whole idea of removing desire. The second line is, if the rare and precious are not coveted, people will not steal. I think this is so relevant as well to our society, because you think about, our society talks about the 1%, the 1% of people who make most of the money in the world. They own everything. They control a huge amount of influence and power, and they are depicted as driving these very expensive vehicles that are more expensive than like my house, and they wear clothing that's more expensive than anything I've ever owned in my whole life, and they wear jewelry, and they go on private jets, and they have all of this sort of associated lifestyle. And there is a lot of resentment and hate towards them. I'm not here to say whether it's justified or not. I don't think hate is justified in any way, but the greed and the accumulation of wealth in a very small amount of people, where the vast majority of everyone else is sort of suffering and dealing with incredibly hard times, that is a great explanation of why desire is a problem, and why this kind of sort of greed and ambition are a real problem, because all of that wealth has accumulated in a small group of people, whereas the vast majority of people are now really struggling. And it's because these people have figured out the system, and they know how to make it work for them, and they can manipulate the legal structure, they can manipulate all kinds of things in their industries, the laws that govern whatever they do to make money. And these people have accumulated a vast amount of the wealth in the world, resulting in a whole bunch of people suffering and dealing with really hard times. And so that is a perfect example of why desire is a real problem in our society, because you've accumulated that, but you're not doing anything with it. A billionaire could spend hundreds of thousands of dollars a day and never run out of money. Like the vast amount of money that represents, generated and then just controlled by one person. It's really hard to wrap your head around how much money $1 billion is. And it's a perfect explanation of why desire is an issue. So I think those are the two big lines in this translation of this chapter. I'm not gonna lie, this translation of it is very wordy, and I think I don't love this translation of it, but it's the one we're given. It does get the point across, but yeah, I don't know. The last line I think is important as well. And so the last line, I'll read the whole thing at the end like I always do, but in doing by not doing, there is nothing that cannot be controlled. So that kind of concept again is perfect Wu Wei, and it's the idea of not acting. Non-action is almost always the best course of action, because in not doing, you are not setting up these systems like we just talked about that sort of create greed and poverty, and like those things are linked. Those like greed and poverty are inherently linked. I don't care if you're a conservative or you're a liberal or whatever. We're not talking about politics here, but the greed of one group of people can directly correlate to the disparity in other communities and in other people, because we all live on this earth, and the earth is essentially a closed system. Apart from meteorites and things that come out and the stuff that we send outside of earth, we are essentially a little closed system powered by the sun. And having this extreme greed is going to affect everybody. Your actions always affect other people. And so by not making actions, you are not affecting other people. You see how that kind of works? Like if you can just live in your own sphere of influence and not negatively impact the earth, negatively impact other people, you have removed desire from your life. It leads to a much nicer existence for all of us. So, thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Removing desire. If talent is not glorified, people will not compete with one another. If the rare and precious are not coveted, people will not steal. If desirable objects are not wantonly displayed, people's hearts will not be in turmoil. When the enlightened man orders things, he bestows a mind empty of needless concerns, a stomach full of nourishing food. He ensures selfish resolve and strengthens the body. As a guiding principle, he removes the opportunities for willfulness and covetousness from the ordinary people, and withholds the opportunities for misusing their knowledge from the educated. In doing by not doing, there is nothing that cannot be controlled.